good. Good morning. I want to thank all of you for being here today. What I want to do is just kind of give a quick oversight of where we are in the events that happened on Saturday in our city. It resulted in a homicide. Several individuals that were taken to the hospital as a result of being struck by firearm, being struck as a result of several shootings. And then give some updates and kind of the next steps of where we're going. So just bear with me. We're still not even 48 hours into this incident. Incidents, they're all linked together, but I think it's important for our residents, our citizens, our community to kind of have an understanding of where we're at, what we know at this point, and then the steps that we're going as we move forward. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of walk through the steps, and then at the end I'll take a few questions and we'll go from there. All right. So on Saturday, approximately around 3:30 in the afternoon, officers received a phone call of shots fired in the 100 block of Otis Street. Officers responded there at a gas station beside a car wash. When they arrived, they found an adult female. Her name is Chandra Eason. She has suffered gunshot wounds and was pronounced dead at the scene. We had several witnesses and good video footage of that incident. Citizens came forward, they stayed at the scene, they came forward and gave officers excellent information. We were able to get a good physical description, a license plate of that vehicle, and through the quick detective work, the officers that arrived and set up that scene, interviewed those witnesses, we were able to determine our suspect. His name is Jerome Uzzle. He is also in his early 30s. They were married. He got into a vehicle and fled to an address that we were able to locate in the 700 block of Peninsula Drive. Chief Randall and other officers responded to that scene and set up a perimeter, while myself and Chief Grinstead stayed at the scene with our homicide detectives and the officers as we dealt with witnesses in coordinating the homicide scene. The vehicle that he fled in was parked in front of his address there on Peninsula Drive. So again, we set up a perimeter. Chief Grinstead called and activated the SWAT team. They began responding, but we did have a very good perimeter set up at that location. The picture of Mr. Uzzle was sent out to all officers. We were able to obtain a photograph of him. We sent that out to all officers and what we'd had, what had occurred. As the perimeter was set up about 2 hours later, so about a little around 5:30, Officer Robert Stewart was in his vehicle, sort of at the rear part of the perimeter with a ride-along. Robert and Macy were sitting inside the vehicle. When Mr. Uzzle approached that vehicle from behind, he took position on the left side of the vehicle, which would be the driver's side of the vehicle, and an ambush-style shooting, fired multiple rounds inside the vehicle. Officer Stewart was struck, so was Macy, and Officer Stewart was able to return fire. Officers began to collapse on the area to move towards where the shooting had occurred. There were several citizens in the area. You can understand a little bit of the commotion there. Officer Brendan Kidder was one of the first to come in contact with Mr. Uzzle. He drew his firearm, gave him commands. He fired his firearm. At some point, Mr. Uzzle was struck. He fell. He got back up, was able to make it a few more feet, where he was taken into custody by Chief Randall, Captain Bullhurst, and other officers at the scene. He was immediately rendered aid. We also had citizens come forward and render aid to Officer Stewart and Macy. All three were transported to a Riverside hospital where they were undergoing treatment and surgery. We went there, we cleared one residence that we thought Mr. Uzzle may have came from, and then we also went in and cleared his residence where he lived. There was evidence recovered from inside his residence. There was also evidence recovered, certainly covered from the scene there in the apartment complex and back on Otis Drive. The shell casings that were recovered from Otis Drive are consistent with the caliber of the shell casings recovered at the apartment complex. We'll do NIBIN testing to verify all that, but they're very consistent. We did recover a firearm. in the apartment complex. Several officers responded to the hospital, myself included. I spoke with Macy, and I spoke with Officer Stewart, and then I was able to get Mr. Uzzle was in surgery. I was not able to talk to him. If you want to go back, I'm going to give you an update on all three individuals, but I will tell you at about 12:30 Saturday night into Sunday morning, Mr. Uzzle succumbed to his injuries and passed away at the hospital. This morning, I spoke to Mrs. Jordan, that's Sharonda's mother. We had a very good conversation. I told her that I was sorry for her loss. We had a good conversation. We shed a few tears, and I told her that she's now part of our family, and anything that we can do for her or her family, we would do that. And I hope that she appreciated that phone call. About an hour before I came into this room, I talked to Mrs. Howe, that's Jerome Uzzle's mother, the mother of our suspect. We had a very good conversation. It was a hard conversation. I will tell you, we didn't get into what happened and why. That she also lost a son, and we shed a few tears as well. I will tell you that she told me she apologized for what her son did, and she didn't understand it. I just want her to know that she's in our thoughts and prayers, and if there's anything that we can do for her or her family. The officers that were engaged in return gunfire, Officer Robert Stewart and Officer Brendan Kidder. They both have been in this department for approximately 2 years. I will tell you that they are both heroes, and I think their actions saved lives. I cannot be more proud of the officers that responded to the scene, the perimeter that was set up, the way the officers handled the homicide scene on Otis Drive in coordination. We were able to link the two together. I cannot be more impressed and proud of the citizens of the city that stayed at that scene and provided information, and I don't mean just one. There were multiple citizens that were at that location and provided us information on what they saw. Because of that cooperation, the cooperation of the management of the business, the citizens that were there, we were able to identify our suspect and determine the location very, very quickly and to get that information out to officers. The officers responded extremely well, and a good perimeter was set up. And the location we were watching, his address, that is not the address he came out of. He came out of an address a few blocks away. There is still a lot of work to be done. We had a briefing just before we came in here. This case will now be investigated by the Homicide Division, the Internal Affairs Division, the Commonwealth Attorney's Office, State Lab in Norfolk, and our forensic technicians. There's a lot of interviews to be done. There's a lot of information to go over. At the end of the day, we have 2 individuals that lost their life, and we have 2 individuals at the hospital. Officer Stewart and Macy are both recovering. They're both in stable condition. One has already had 1 surgery. They both are scheduled to have surgery later today. I have met with both of them, not only Saturday, I went to see them yesterday, and myself and the rest of the command staff, Chief Hudgens, Chief Grinstead, and Chief Randall went to see them today. We spoke with their families and them as well at their bedside, and then gave the families as much information as we could. They were both in good spirits, and what impresses me the most is we both had the same comment. Officer Stewart asked how Macy was as soon as we saw him, and Macy, who was doing a ride along with this department, her first question was, how is Officer Stewart? They're both heroes, both fighters. They're both in good spirits. A little bit of pain and discomfort, that's understandable. It was important for me to take time to go see them and meet with them and their families before I released any information to the media. So again, we're not even 48 hours into this this situation that hit our city, but I owed it to them and their families, all involved. And I wanted to have some conversation with them, talk to them, and share my concern and feelings for it. So my heart goes out to all of the individuals involved. And right now I'm focused on the 2 that are at the hospital and their treatment, their surgery, and their improvement. Getting better. I want to thank, we got a tremendous amount of support Our city manager, assistant city manager called, kept them updated. The mayor's called, I talked to him the day of the scene. We had a conversation this morning, offered his support, anything that he needed. I talked with Howard Glenn on Saturday, our Commonwealth attorney, and I met with him in the briefing we had this morning, and we had a few words just before I stepped in here. Fire Chief Johnson, Fire Department. But also there was medics, and I wish I knew their name, but they came to us right away, and they had the Macy and Officer Stewart in their ambulance. And before they left, they told us they would take care of them. And they did a great job. They kept us informed. They did the transport, and then they actually came back and gave us updates. And I appreciate the relationship that we have with the fire department and the work that they did. So as we move forward, we talked a little bit about, you know what, I'll be remiss. I've had numerous calls all weekend long from citizens, not only on the phone, but just interacting in the neighborhood, coming up to officers. Chief Grinstead and myself, before we left that scene, there was a large group of citizens that were in the neighborhood of what just happened here. We spent some time talking to them briefly, as much as we could. I appreciate the support that we got from the individuals who live in that apartment complex. They came up and they asked what was going on, and they understood it was a large crime scene and we were there for a while. They've been very supportive. This community has been very supportive, and I appreciate that. It's a great relationship we have in this city, from our administration, from our citizens, our churches. I've talked to several pastors over the last 2 days. They've just offered up prayers and support and anything that they can do. For the men and women who work in this organization, both sworn and civilian, I think this incident, it's something we've seen, but especially on Saturday, it highlights some of the dangers that we face every day in law enforcement, this career, this field. But I think on Saturday that it gave us the opportunity to show the professionalism and dedication and service to this community, our neighborhoods, our city, and this department. And I could not be more proud of the officers, the way they handled both scenes, both situations, the way they showed support at the hospital for the two individuals that were there. I'm truly honored to work with such great individuals, very talented individuals in a tough situation. But I think when we face those challenges, it gives us in law enforcement, it gives the men and women of this department the ability to show just how great they are. They did a fantastic job, and I cannot tell them how much I appreciate what they did, especially Officer Stewart and Officer Kerr. They saved lives. So with that, I just want to thank, like I said, we're still only about 48 hours into this situation, into this incident, this case, but I do want to remember that not only the two individuals at the hospital, there were other family members who lost loved ones, and I wanted to talk to both of those families, and my heart goes out to both of them. I believe this stemmed from a domestic violence situation. They were married. And all that will come out. There's a lot of interviews to go. Homicide detectives, forensics detectives will work through the night. I think some of them haven't even been home yet, and I got to make sure that they're okay. We have our department psychologist that came Saturday night to talk to some officers before we sent them home. I needed to make sure that they were okay. We have our CISM department that deals with stress and critical incident management. They met with each roll call yesterday and the 911 dispatchers to make sure they're okay. I'm still concerned about them. We sent an immediate text message out to our officers so they knew that there had been an officer-involved shooting and that Officer Stewart was okay. I wanted to calm that situation down and calm tensions down, feeling not knowing what's going on. I think that communication is important. But now we will turn this case over to the investigators and let them do their part. There's still a lot of things to do, a lot of people to interview, a lot of footage to go over. But I have the utmost confidence in them, our Commonwealth Attorney's Office, and the citizens in this city. I cannot thank them enough of how they responded and stayed at the scene where it would have been so easy just to drive away, and the support that we got while we were in the apartment complex on Saturday. So with that, I think I've hit on everything, but I'll take a few questions and just be mindful that we are 48 hours into this case, and there's still a lot of work to do. But the men and women of this organization, top notch. Are there any questions?
Chief, I understand, and not sure how much you can go into, but the couple, they had children, and I don't know if you've spoken with children or how they're doing, how are they doing, or if they were there at the scene that Saturday. Have you gotten a chance to talk to the family?
So I will tell you this, that we made sure that all family members were safe. That was one of our top priorities, is to find out where the kids were. We were able to do that, and then when I talked to Ms. Jordan this morning, we went over that very issue, and I think I felt her heart on the phone when we talked. I felt her heart for just the whole situation. But yes, that's important to me, and we had a strong conversation about that.
The suspect, Mr. Uzzle, I believe you said his name was he known to you all at any point before this incident? Did you have any issues?
You know, I'd have to go back and look, but from what I understand, I don't believe that there was much of a relationship with officers. I don't want to misquote. We had a short conversation about that when we checked our system on Saturday. I left that briefing a little early, but I don't think that it was an individual we had a great deal of interaction with.
Can you go into more detail about the conditions of the officer in the civilian?
So out of respect, I will tell you that Officer Stewart was struck. His wounds are not considered life-threatening. Let me tell you, he is a good officer. He's in good spirits. Like I said, he's going to undergo another surgery. Well, he'll undergo his first surgery later today. Expect a full recovery, but I don't want to go too much into that with the medical side. And then Macy had one surgery already. She has another one scheduled for today. We all were at her bedside. I was able to, like I said, I went in to see her, and I put my hand in her hand. We held hands, and we talked. And the first thing she asked me was, how was Officer Stewart? And that, Chief Hudges, I think, said it best. That really shows her character right there. She is a fighter. She's going to pull through, but she's going to have a couple surgeries.
Can you say why this person was riding along?
So we departments across the country, and Newport News included, have a ride along programs. It is for individuals who want kind of experience and see what it's like in law enforcement. In fact, those individuals that want to join our department, we encourage them to do a ride along so they see, we get the feel of, is this something they would like to do? I remember when I did mine 27 years ago, and how I felt in that exposure. So I don't want to go too much into Macy. I will just say that it was something she'd been looking forward to, and this was just a very, very unfortunate incident. And I want to stress again that this wasn't a situation when our suspect came to that vehicle. It wasn't a situation where there was a standoff and engagement. This was an ambush-style shooting. Approached that vehicle from the blind side, fired multiple rounds inside that vehicle, and by the grace of God, both of those are still with us today.
Can you talk more about the ride along? Are you looking at that program from a safety perspective going forward?
We certainly we reevaluate just about everything we do. We have policies that every year we're updating and re-going over. I asked them to pull the policies so we could go through it today. We've been doing ride-alongs in this department for well over 30 years. I have heard of some ride-alongs, not here, but in other departments where there may be a traffic accident where someone may be injured. But it's an individual, they apply. We do a background check on that process, and if it's something that they want to do, we sign a waiver and they ride along with us to kind of get an idea. Some do a whole shift, some just do a little bit of time. And again, it's one of the things that we use to we encourage individuals, if they want to join this department or any department. I think it's important that they get to see. Matter of fact, I talked to the mayor, and he had said just a while back that he was considering doing a ride along with it a little bit to come out and ride with some officers. So this is just an unfortunate incident that it could occur. And I think, without going into the case and some of the evidence that we have, I think Mr. Uzzle was determined to do what he did, and I don't want to go much further.
Could you say and spell his name so we have a correct?
We're going to send out a release afterwards. I don't want to get it wrong. I know it's Jerome Uzzle. He was in his early to mid-30s, but we'll send that out with all the correct spelling. Sean and Uzzle, the officers' names.
Chief, real quick, I know I've talked with you before in the past about domestic violence in the city, and you all obviously working every day to try to combat that. Now, after this latest incident, looking at, moving any resources anywhere, how are we going to continue to combat domestic violence here?
When I did the year-end press conference, I guess I did it here in January, but reflecting back on last year, one of the things that were important to me is suicides, homelessness, and domestic violence. We are down in just about every crime in this city except domestic violence. And it's not just this case. Out of the 15 homicides that we have in our city, 4 or 5 are now linked directly, maybe even 6 are linked directly to known individuals in domestic violence. That's just homicides. I'm not even talking about assaults and shootings. That is a real problem. That is a real problem for us that we have. Individuals with relationships and conflicts, and understand stresses in life, but we've got to continue to find better, new ways to address it. Whether we look at best practices, whether we look at some things that other departments have done, thinking outside the box. I don't think we can do it the same way that we've always done it. I don't want to just respond. One of the things with domestic violence is so often they happen inside a residence that we don't hear about it until we're putting up crime scene data, where individuals, maybe neighbors, people that you work with to tell signs, but it is a concern for me. I just had a conversation with Mr. Gwynn before I walked in here about that same topic. I can tell you one of the things that we're doing here at Newport News is we are going to bring in a domestic violence coordinator, a civilian, to work along with our special victims unit and our community youth and outreach. We already have domestic violence advocates in the Commonwealth Attorney's Office after a case has happened. I have got to try to do more. I believe this department has to do more. There has to be a bigger push from us to address some of the social issues. And I want to do it from a proactive approach. I want to talk to middle school kids. I want to talk to high school kids. I want to have college kids. I want to have forums. I want to create an atmosphere where people feel they can come forward. We have seen too many homicides in this city. There have been a direct result of domestic violence. Too many assaults, too many shootings. It is a real concern. And I look at our crime data, evidence-based, factual-based, where are we seeing our violence? And that is one crime that continues to grow and do not have a decrease in. And I am extremely concerned about those domestic violence cases. We have a great special victims unit. Sergeant Ross and her team moved very, very quickly to address those issues. But so often we're dealing with it after something happens. We've got to find a better way to get it on the front end and be proactive. And I don't think it's just a police response. I'm asking our churches to help us, our schools to help us, our communities, our neighborhoods, organizations and businesses, even here in our own department. We're going to be having some people come in and talk to us as a group about signs of suicide, signs of domestic violence abuse, creating an atmosphere for people to come forward. And I want citizens to know that if they're having problems, if they're having conflict, to please tell someone, ask someone, seek help. Because like Mr. Glenn said, when someone makes a threat against you in domestic violence situations, you can't just take that for granted. And he's absolutely right.
Chief,
Yes, sir.
So with ride-alongs, is it normal to have a ride-along go to the scene of homicide or potential suspect?
So let's be clear. Focus today, for me, is the 2 individuals that are in the hospital, right? They are both injured. I got an officer there that's going to have surgery later, and a young lady who did a ride-along because she's interested in this field. That's where my focus is. The ride-along program that we have in this department is like many others across this country. And here's the thing. We knew where he lived, we knew where his vehicle was, and we set up a perimeter around that location. We weren't going to let that vehicle leave, whether he got into it or anyone else, because we believed evidence would be in that car. And I wanted also that location, that apartment, because we believed evidence may be in there or he himself. In fact, that's why Chief Prinstead activated the SWAT team immediately once we knew where he was. The individual, Officer Stewart and Macy, were parked about a block or a block and a half away, way out of that area. Not in front of that house, not right behind it, not at the side, way out of the way. The individual, the reason that those 2 individuals were hurt is because Mr. Uzzle came out and ambush style and shot into that vehicle multiple times. So we're going to look at that ride-along program and make sure we have best practices. But over 30 years, I was talking with Chief Prinstead. This is one or 2 incidents that we know of where someone's been injured on a ride-along in our city. And I think the other we talked about was within a vehicle accident. But my main priority right now is the 2 families that lost loved ones, and the 2 individuals that are in the hospital recovering. And that's where our focus should be. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
So you seem to stress quite a bit the fact that people stayed, witnesses stayed, and witnesses talked to the police. Is that something, I know it's been problematic in the past, is that something that you guys have been working on?
I will tell you, I've been here a year. That's a great point. You were at the scene, and I appreciate that. And I appreciate the cooperation and respect that you showed there. Thank you, my friend. When I walked in the door here, community policing, the reason we do it, right, is to engage the community, create an atmosphere of trust, transparency. It's one of the reasons that I'm standing before you today. We encourage citizens to come forward, to take back their neighborhoods, to take back their areas where they live, their blocks, right? Just in their immediate surrounding, to know their neighbors. And if they see something, to say something, right? To protect this city, their community, to look out for one another. We always struggle. It is always a concern for people to come forward. When I talk to the detectives on some of the scenes that we've had where the sergeants, lieutenant, Captain Hardy will tell me we had numerous people around, but nobody wants to come forward. And I understand that perception of fear. But in this situation, in this case, there were multiple people that stayed and came forward. There were some that helped us out with video, the management of that business, individuals that were there that could have very easily driven off. They stayed, and they made sure that we had their information. And even after we talked to them, they stayed and asked, is there anything more we can do? The reason we were able to locate and identify this individual so quickly is a direct result of the response that those officers had at that scene and the interaction with the citizens that were there. They did not leave. And I cannot thank this community enough. But I don't want to just say just this scene. I have seen over the last 12, 13 months that I've been here, more and more citizens are coming forward. I believe, I talked to one of our local pastors, and he would agree with me. He brought it up. The reason we're seeing some of our cases solved so quickly is because citizens are getting involved. The double murder that we had just a few weeks ago, it's a direct result in citizens coming forward. We were able to stop that individual 2 blocks away from where that situation happened. That is so vital. It sends a message to the criminal element, or those that would be out there that want to prey on others, that citizens are not going to tolerate that type of violence in our communities. And I just encourage citizens in any situation, whether you think it's a crime or not, to call us and let us investigate it. I would rather knock on the door and it be families having fun and a good time than to come back later and have to be stringing up crime scene tape. Those individuals that stayed and provided us with information, they're the ones, I think they're heroes. They saved lives. And they led to a direct result of how quickly we responded. We were able to get to that scene and locate Mr. Rowe. Anybody else? I want to appreciate you all for coming today and taking the time. Again, we're 48 hours, not even 48 hours into this. Detectives are still working around the clock. They've done some amazing work. Our forensic technicians processing that scene. It was a large scene. They have multiple scenes where you have a homicide, 2 entries that are being made, photographs, aerial photos. We use some of our technology to do that. Surrounding a location, an officer-involved shooting, a young girl who's interested in law enforcement, and they're both in good spirits. They both have strong families, and being able to interact with them, my heart goes out to them. My heart goes out to those that lost loved ones as a result of these 2 incidents. But I cannot thank this community and the support that we have seen from our citizens, our churches, our businesses. I want to thank the mayor, Cindy Roth, Bo Clayton, our assistant city manager. Been in contact with them throughout the last 48 hours, and they have had tremendous support. And the men and women who work in this organization, they do the work behind the scenes. They responded to that situation, both scenes. How much support? I think the hospital staff's getting a little frustrated with us for all the officers that are showing up, and I think somebody got some food stuck in today. I got to go back and check into that. But those are strong people, and I believe the actions of this department saved lives on Saturday afternoon, Saturday evening. If we don't have any more questions, I'm going to end it there. We'll get that press release out, has all the address and time frames and spellings of those names. But I appreciate you all coming today and spending some time with us. Okay?
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.